All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into Secret Window, but not the movie itself. We're going to be looking at what people are saying about this Johnny Depp film over on IMDb. And let me tell you, the reviews there's something else.
They really run the gamut, don't they? Some people absolutely love it, while others are left scratching their heads.
It's wild. It's like the film itself is a secret window.
Yeah.
Offering a different view depending on who's looking through it.
I like that. A secret window, yeah.
Right. So we've got one user, Lopcar1993, who is really into that old school horror vibe. They were also praising Depp and John Turturro for their performances. And then there's Sergi Suno, who got totally hooked on all the symbolism in the film, and that ending that just leaves you feeling kind of unsettled. But on the other hand, we have Night Critic, who called it a compelling, if slow-burning, thriller. So we're already seeing a pretty wide spectrum of reactions here. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that range of responses really suggests there's more to this film than what we see on the surface.
Right. Okay, so moving on to another interesting thing we noticed. One thing that seems to be a constant is the praise for Johnny Depp's performance as Mort Rainey. Even people who didn't love the movie seem to agree that Depp was fantastic in this role.
Yeah.
One user, Lee Eisenberg, even said that Depp is the most interesting actor of his generation, just based on this one performance. Now, we all know Depp often plays, kind of eccentric characters. But what is it about his acting in Secret Window that really seems to resonate with viewers?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned eccentric characters. But it's more than just that. I think Depp brings a certain vulnerability to those roles.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And in Secret Window, in particular, he's playing this writer who's struggling with writer's block on top of going through a really messy divorce.
Right.
And I think Depp manages to layer those very personal struggles onto the character's descent into paranoia really, really well. Take, for example, the scene where Mort confronts his wife's lover. Depp has this quiet intensity in that scene. His eyes are darting back and forth. And you really can't tell if he's about to break down or just explode. And I think it's that unpredictability, that sense of a character right on edge that keeps the viewers engaged.
Makes sense. So we've got the Depp factor, this complex character study. But we can't ignore the elephant in the room, the twist. I don't want to spoil anything for those who haven't seen the movie. But reading through the reviews, this twist seems to be a major make-or-break point for a lot of viewers. Some people, like You're Too Much Fun, were absolutely blown away. They said they had to rewatch the film a few times just to fully grasp everything that was going on. But other viewers said it was predictable and they saw it coming a mile away.
The twist. Especially in psychological thrillers. It's such a fascinating tool for filmmakers to play with. When it's done well, it can really elevate a film. Like, it leaves the audience wanting to dissect every little detail afterward.
Really?
But if the twist is predictable, or if it just doesn't land right, it can feel cheap, like the filmmakers took a shortcut to get to this big reveal instead of actually earning that surprise.
Yeah, totally.
What I find really interesting is how Secret Window uses the twist to kind of reflect on the very nature of storytelling itself.
Oh, how so?
Well, it plays with our expectations as viewers, just like Mort plays with the expectations of his readers in the story.
Kate, are you saying the twist itself is like another layer of storytelling within the movie?
Exactly. It's not just some plot device. It's more of a commentary on the whole act of deception, both within the narrative of the film and in how stories, in general, are crafted to kind of manipulate our perceptions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And that's what makes these reactions to Secret Window so interesting. Some viewers get really caught up in that game, They enjoy the ride, even if they kind of see where things are going.
Yeah.
But then you have others who feel cheated if they're not genuinely surprised by the twist.
I can see that.
It raises the question, though, is the value of a twist purely in its shock value? Or can a twist still be effective even if it's predictable, as long as it's serving some larger purpose within the story?
That's a great question. It's like, are we just in it for the destination, or is the journey just as important?
Precisely. And that's something we'll be unpacking further as we continue our deep dive into Secret Window. We'll explore whether the film really delivers on its promises, whether those twists and turns actually lead to a satisfying ending.
Yeah, because some people are definitely saying it doesn't.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so fascinating.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back to dive even deeper into these Secret Window reviews. Stay tuned. Okay, so we're back, and we've talked a lot about Johnny Depp's performance as Mort and about that twist that people either seem to love or hate. But let's dig a little deeper into some of these other things people are saying over on IMDb.
In the last part, you mentioned how Depp brings vulnerability to the role. And I think that really taps into something that a lot of writers struggle with, that fear of plagiarism, the pressure to constantly be producing new work, and even the blurring of fiction and reality. Secret Window almost becomes this kind of dark mirror reflecting the creative process.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, one user, Claudio Carvalho, even said the film does a good job of really slowly building up the characters, which makes the ending hit even harder because you really feel like you're going through this whole thing with Mort as he's slowly losing his grip on reality.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of the ending, I noticed that was a pretty big point of discussion in a lot of the reviews.
Yeah, for sure.
For some people, like Sleep and Dragon, it was the perfect climax, like everything was building up to that moment.
Right.
But then you have others, like Patreon who felt kind of let down by it.
Interesting.
Thought it was predictable, especially for a Stephen King story.
So it seems like people are either on one side or the other when it comes to the ending, too. It all comes back to that twist, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Harrison even joked that there are no spoilers because knowing the twist kind of ruins the whole movie. But is that really fair? Can't a movie be good even if you figure out the ending early on?
It's an interesting question, right? If a movie leans too heavily on a single twist, it does run the risk of falling apart once that element of surprise is gone. But I think Secret Window offers more than just the twist.
Okay.
It's got this descent into madness, the blurring of what's real and what's not, and this exploration of the pressures of the creative process.
Right.
And I think all of that can still hold up even if you see the ending coming.
I see what you mean. It's like watching a magic trick. Even if you know how it's done, you can still appreciate the skill and artistry involved.
Precisely. Some viewers just want that big reveal, that moment where their jaw drops.
Yeah.
But I think others are more interested in a film that really messes with their minds, regardless of whether they predict the ending or not.
And Secret Window definitely seems to do that.
Mm.
Americanos 23706 called it a deep trip inside that changes how you see things. And You're Too Much Fun said that it'll leave you with a lot to think about.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot more to it than just jump scares and a big plot twist.
Absolutely. The film almost holds up a mirror and forces you to question what you believe, what's real and what's not. And this ties into another aspect that comes up in the reviews, the pacing of the film.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, some viewers, like Night Critic, described it as slow burning.
Okay.
Like it gradually builds tension over time.
Right.
But then you have others, like Snoopy style, who felt like the film could have used a bit more intensity.
So it seems like the pacing was a bit divisive, too. Some people liked the slow burn, and others wanted more action.
Exactly. It just comes down to personal preference, I guess.
Makes sense.
Some people find the gradual unraveling of sanity more disturbing and unsettling, while others just want those immediate thrills.
Now, this next point is something I found really interesting.
Yeah.
A girl 14 said the film was a decent adaptation of tough material. And it made me wonder, is it even possible to fully capture all the nuances of a Stephen King story on screen?
Adapting any novel is a challenge, especially one as intricate and psychologically layered as King's work.
Yeah.
But I think Secret Window does manage to capture that sense of unease and dread that we associate with King's writing.
And how do you think it does that?
I think a lot of it comes down to the visual style.
Okay.
Remember how Lopkar in 1993 was praising that old school horror vibe?
Yeah.
They loved how the film focuses on mood and suspense over gore.
Right.
And Suno specifically mentioned the awesome cinematography.
I can almost picture it, Those long shots, the shadows creeping in.
Exactly. Even the setting plays a role.
Oh, how so?
Lechuguilla specifically mentioned that cabin where Mort lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
The classic, creepy, isolated cabin.
It works so well in horror, right?
Definitely.
It enhances that sense of isolation and really allows the character's mental state to become almost palpable.
For sure. But even with all that, it seems like some reviewers still had some criticisms.
Mm-hmm.
Verhoof, for example, said that while the performances and the direction were great, they felt like the film relied a bit too heavily on those familiar thriller tropes we were talking about earlier.
Right, and Analog Devotee, who thought the film was overall pretty good, still said it felt like something was missing.
Something was missing, huh?
And I think these critiques point to a larger takeaway. Even if Secret Window doesn't necessarily reinvent the thriller genre,
Right.
it still manages to spark a lot of interesting discussions and leave a lasting impression on the audience.
Okay, yeah, I get that.
It's not trying to be this perfect masterpiece, but it's definitely engaging.
So to recap, we've got a film that's visually stunning, with great performances and a thought-provoking twist. Plus, it explores these anxieties surrounding the creative process that a lot of people can probably relate to. But there's one more thing we haven't talked about yet. Secret Window's place in the larger world of Stephen King adaptations.
Oh, yeah, great point. How does this film compare to all the other films based on King's work? That's a big question.
It is a big question, and it's one we'll be tackling when we come back for the final part of our deep dive into Secret Window. Okay, so we're back, and we've covered a lot of ground with Secret Window. We've talked about the acting, the visuals, that crazy twist, but let's not forget that this film is based on a novella by, well, by the master of horror himself, Stephen King. So how does Secret Window fit into his massive library of work?
That's a great question. And you know, one thing that really jumped out at me is how this film kind of echoes this recurring theme in King's writing, the whole idea of the dark side of creativity.
Oh.
Like, think about novels like Misery or The Shining, or even
Oh, yeah.
they all kind of explore this idea that the act of creating something can actually unleash something dangerous, something that consumes the creator.
Right, like they become a prisoner of their own imagination.
Exactly. And in Secret Window, you know, that dark force takes the form of John Shooter.
Right, the guy who accuses Mort of plagiarism.
Yeah, exactly. And reading through these reviews, it seems like there's more to Shooter than meets the eye.
Interesting.
Like, one user, Julius Griffin, wasn't even a huge fan of the film overall.
Okay.
But they specifically praised John Turturro's performance as Shooter.
Wow, really?
Yeah, they said he was consistently good and incredibly entertaining.
So even people who didn't love the movie thought he did a good job.
Yeah, and I think Turturro really captures that unsettling energy that we often see in King's villains.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He's got this charisma, but he's also really terrifying at the same time.
Right.
And his presence adds this extra layer of psychological tension to the film, almost like he's this physical embodiment of Mort's inner demons.
Oh, wow, I like that.
Yeah.
The villain is a symbol of the writer's internal struggles.
Right. It makes you think, like, is Shooter even real? Or is he just a projection of Mort's crumbling psyche? The film leaves that question kind of hanging there, you know?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And speaking of King's work, one user, Distress12, compared Secret Window to other King adaptations, like the Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile. They said that even though Secret Window might not reach those same heights, it still has that depth of character and story, which they said is often missing from, typical horror films.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. King's best work goes beyond just cheap scares.
Yeah.
It explores the human condition, the darkness that exists beneath the surface of everyday life.
Right, right.
And I think Secret Window does manage to tap into those deeper themes, even though it's a thriller. It's more than just a superficial genre flick.
Now, there's this one review that kind of threw me for a loop. The user described Secret Window as a child of the corn. And I was thinking, is there some connection I'm missing here?
Oh, right. Yeah, that was Chantella Casey's review. And while Secret Window isn't directly related to Children of the Corn, I think both stories share this unsettling sense of isolation. This sense of madness and this potential for violence erupting in unexpected places.
Yeah, you're right. There's this shared atmosphere of dread.
Exactly. And just like with Mort in Secret Window, we're left questioning what's real and what's not. That line between sanity and delusion becomes really blurry.
Yeah, definitely messes with your head. So after going through all of these reviews, it seems like Secret Window isn't a perfect film, but it does offer this really captivating blend of suspense and strong performances. Plus, it touches on those classic Stephen King themes, the ones that make you think twice about turning off the lights at night.
Yeah, absolutely. It may not be the most critically acclaimed Stephen King adaptation out there,
but it's definitely one that sticks with you.
And it brings up some interesting questions, too, like, how much does the actor's performance influence how we view a film?
Yeah, good question.
And can a twist still be effective even if it's predictable? And why are we so drawn to these stories about the dark side of art and creativity?
Those are great questions, and ones that, I think are worth thinking about. So there you have it, everyone. We've taken a deep dive into the world of Secret Window, looking at what people are saying about this Johnny Depp film. And we uncovered some pretty interesting insights along the way. If you haven't seen Secret Window yet, we highly recommend checking it out and forming your own opinion. And as always, keep those critical thinking skills sharp. Question what you see, question what you hear, and keep exploring those hidden depths in the stories we tell. Until next time, happy viewing.